The year is 1175, and the world stands on the precipice of transformation. Across the vast Eurasian continent, empires rise and fall like waves against distant shores, but none yet comprehend the storm gathering on the Mongolian steppes. In Song China, the most advanced civilization on Earth perfects gunpowder and printing while building walls to keep out barbarian horsemen. The Khwarezmian Empire controls the Silk Road's golden arteries, its rulers drunk on tribute from merchants who carry spices, silk, and precious stones between East and West. In Europe, knights in heavy armor consider themselves the pinnacle of military evolution, their castles seemingly impregnable monuments to feudal power. But beyond the Great Wall, beyond the cities and kingdoms, beyond the imaginations of settled peoples, something unprecedented is stirring. The Mongolian steppes stretch endlessly under an infinite sky, a realm where survival depends on horseback skills learned before you can walk, where tribal confederations form and shatter like ice in spring floods, where the weak perish and only the most adaptable endure. This is a world where a single mind of sufficient brilliance can reshape continents, where tactical genius matters more than noble birth, whether to see patterns others miss can elevate a forest tribesman to become the architect of the largest contiguous empire in human history. The tribes speak in dozens of dialects, but they share common understanding. Warfare is the ultimate art, mobility trumps fortification, and victory belongs to those who can think 3 moves ahead while their enemies are still planning their first. Chinese chroniclers call them barbarians. Muslim historians dismiss them as godless savages. European knights will learn to fear them as demons. But they do not yet know that among these barbarians walks a child whose tactical mind will prove more devastating than any weapon ever forged. In felt tents scattered across grass seas that stretch beyond horizons, shamans read omens in cracked shoulder blades and scattered stones. They speak of great changes coming, of a time when the steppe peoples will ride beyond their traditional boundaries and remake the world in their image. They do not know that the instrument of this transformation has already been born, not among the noble Mongol clans, but in the forests to the north, among the Uryankai people who herd reindeer and forge iron, who are considered outsiders even by steppe standards. Your birth coincides with no particular celestial event, announces itself with no supernatural portents. You enter the world as winter tightens its grip on the taiga, when survival itself is an achievement, and every day alive is a victory wrested from an indifferent universe. Your people understand something the great civilizations have forgotten, that comfort breeds weakness, that easy victories teach nothing, that true strength comes only from facing impossible odds and finding ways to prevail anyway. The Uryankai occupy the borderlands between forest and steppe, between the sedentary and nomadic worlds, between the known and unknown. This liminal existence will shape everything about you. Your ability to adapt, to see opportunities where others see only obstacles, to understand that the strongest position is often the one that appears most vulnerable. You are born between worlds, and you will spend your life teaching those worlds that their boundaries are illusions, that their certainties are vulnerabilities, that their strength is weakness waiting to be exploited. As you take your first breath of the impossibly cold air, somewhere to the south, a young man named Temujin struggles to unite fractious Mongol tribes under his leadership. He does not yet know that his greatest general has just been born, that the child shivering in a reindeer hide cradle will become the tactical genius who transforms his tribal confederation into a world-conquering force. Neither do the emperors in their palaces, the caliphs in their courts, or the kings in their castles. They continue their games of dynastic politics and territorial aggrandizement, unaware that a mind is forming in the northern forests that will render all their calculations obsolete. Your story begins not with prophecy or destiny, but with the simple fact of survival in a world where weakness means death. You will learn to read terrain like other children learn to read scrolls, to understand weather patterns as intimately as court poets understand meter and rhyme, to see tactical possibilities in every landscape, every situation, every moment of potential conflict. The skills that keep you alive in childhood will become the foundation for military genius that reshapes continents. This is the world into which you are born, brutal, unforgiving, magnificent in its harsh beauty. A world where tactical brilliance matters more than noble blood, where innovation trumps tradition, where a forest tribe's son can rise to command armies that stretch from sunrise to sunset. The greatest generals in history studied war as an abstract art. You will learn it as a matter of daily survival, and that difference will make you unbeatable. The wind howls across the steppes, carrying snow and the scent of distant fires. In that wind, if you knew how to listen, you might hear the echo of future hoofbeats, millions of them, moving in perfect coordination across vast distances, carrying riders who answer to your commands. But for now, you are simply a child wrapped in furs, taking your first breath in a world that has no idea what it has just unleashed. The Uriankai understand survival in ways that would mystify the soft inhabitants of cities. Your earliest memories form around lessons that would seem harsh to those who grow up behind walls, but which are simply the basic requirements for staying alive in a land where winter can kill the unprepared and where tribal raids can strike without warning. Before you can properly speak, you learn to distinguish between the tracks of horses, wolves, and reindeer in snow. Before you can walk steadily, you know which direction offers escape routes from your family's camp and how long it takes to saddle the horses for flight. Your father works iron with hands scarred by hammer and forge, creating arrowheads and bits that are prized even among the Mongol tribes proper. The Uriankai might be considered outsiders, but their metalwork speaks a language everyone respects. You spend countless hours watching him work, learning to read metal's moods, understanding how heat and hammering can transform raw ore into tools that mean the difference between life and death. But it's not the craft itself that captures your attention. It's the way your father plans each piece, thinking 3 steps ahead, anticipating problems before they arise. This is your first lesson in strategic thinking, though you don't yet have words for what you're learning. The forest teaches different lessons than the open steppe. Here, survival depends on reading subtle signs. The way snow clings to branches, revealing which direction the wind blew during the storm, the patterns of animal trails that show where water can be found, the sounds that mean danger and those that mean safety. You learn to move silently through dense undergrowth, to track wounded game across difficult terrain, to find your way home through wilderness that all looks the same to untrained eyes. These skills will serve you well when you need to move armies through unknown territory or position forces where enemies cannot detect them. But it's during your first real hunt that something crystallizes in your mind, something that sets you apart from other children, something that hints at the tactical genius developing within you. You are 12 years old, armed with a bow your father crafted specifically for your small frame when tracks are discovered leading away from camp. A bear, wounded by some earlier encounter, has been raiding food stores from neighboring camps. The elders decide it must be tracked down before it becomes desperate enough to attack people directly. Picture this moment now. You stand at the edge of the forest as dawn breaks, your breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The tracks are clear in the fresh snow, blood spots, claw marks on trees, the distinctive shuffle of an injured animal. The hunting party consists of 6 men, all experienced trackers, and you, included only because your father insisted you needed to learn. The forest stretches endlessly in all directions, dark and silent, except for the whisper of wind through pine needles. As the group discusses the trail, you find yourself seeing something the others miss. The blood spots don't just show where the bear went. They reveal how it's moving, favoring its left side, probably nursing a shoulder injury. The claw marks on trees aren't random. They form a pattern that shows the animal is staying close to water sources, suggesting it's running a fever from infection. Most importantly, the direction it's traveling isn't random either. You trace the route in your mind and realize the bear is following an ancient game trail that loops back toward a canyon where wounded animals traditionally go to den. You speak up quietly, suggesting the hunting party take a different route, not following the tracks directly, but circling around to intercept the bear at the canyon. The men listen with the polite attention adults give to children's opinions. But your father notices something in your voice, a certainty that makes him pause. He questions your reasoning, and as you explain what you've seen in the tracks, in the landscape, in the pattern of the bear's movement, something changes in the way the other hunters look at you. They follow your suggestion, and 3 hours later, you're proven right. The bear emerges from the forest exactly where you predicted, moving slowly, clearly in pain. The hunt ends quickly, cleanly, with minimal risk to the hunters. But something more important has happened. You've discovered you can see patterns others miss, that you can read the landscape and animal behavior in ways that let you predict what will happen next. This is your first taste of tactical thinking, your first experience of being right when others would have been wrong. Your reputation grows quietly over the following years. You become the child adults consult when deciding which routes to take during seasonal migrations, whose opinion they seek when planning hunting expeditions. You develop an uncanny ability to find lost livestock, to predict weather changes before they become obvious, to sense when other tribes are moving through the area before their scouts are spotted. These might seem like separate skills, but they all stem from the same source: your ability to gather information from dozens of small signs and synthesize it into accurate predictions about complex situations. The political world beyond your forest camps grows increasingly chaotic as you enter your teens. The Mongol tribes war constantly among themselves, forming and breaking alliances with bewildering speed. Temujin, son of a murdered Khan, builds his power base through a combination of military skill, political cunning, and an unusual ability to inspire loyalty among followers. Stories reach your people of great battles, of entire tribes absorbed into growing confederations, of a new kind of warfare emerging on the steppes where mobility and coordination matter more than individual courage. You absorb these stories with intense interest, not for their entertainment value, but for the strategic lessons they contain. You begin to understand that the scattered small-scale raids your people occasionally mount against neighbors are just one possible approach to conflict. The successful Mongol leaders are thinking bigger, operating on larger scales, coordinating multiple forces across vast distances. They're turning warfare from a collection of individual combats into something more systematic, more strategic. Your first direct exposure to this new kind of warfare comes when raiders strike a neighboring Uriankai camp. You're 15, old enough to fight, but still young enough that your role is primarily to help with the horses and maintain escape routes. The attack comes at dawn, as such attacks usually do, but something about this raid feels different. The raiders don't charge in screaming and shooting arrows randomly. They approach systematically, cutting off escape routes before beginning their assault, using coordinated signals to time their attack precisely. From your position with the horse herd, you watch the assault unfold and realize you're seeing something new. Warfare conducted as a planned operation rather than an explosion of individual aggression. The raiders clearly scouted the camp beforehand, studied its layout, identified key targets. They don't waste time or arrows on low-value objectives. They know exactly what they want and how to get it with minimum effort and maximum effect. The raid succeeds because the defenders think they're facing traditional raiders and respond with traditional tactics. They form a defensive circle around the camp's center, fighting bravely but individually. They don't realize their enemies are thinking several moves ahead, have already anticipated their defensive response and planned counters to it. By the time the defenders understand what's happening, the raiders have accomplished their objectives and withdrawn with minimal losses. This raid serves as your introduction to the new military reality emerging on the steppes. Warfare is becoming more professional, more systematic, more effective. Individual courage and traditional tactics are no longer sufficient. Victory now belongs to those who can outthink their enemies, who can coordinate complex operations, who can anticipate responses and plan accordingly. As you help care for the wounded and assess the losses, You understand that your people need to adapt or risk being overwhelmed by opponents who think differently about conflict. Your father recognizes the same truth. Over the following months, he arranges for you to spend time with Mongol tribal units that are allied with, or at least not hostile to, the Uriankai. You learn to ride the steppe ponies that are tougher and more agile than the larger horses your people prefer. You master the composite bow that can punch through armor at ranges that European or Chinese archers would consider impossible. Most importantly, you begin to understand how the new Mongol military organization works. The decimal system that allows perfect coordination between units. The communication methods that keep scattered forces in contact across vast distances. The logistics that let armies move faster and farther than enemies think possible. But even as you learn these new techniques, your mind works differently than your instructors expect. Where they see established procedures to be memorized and followed, you see underlying principles to be understood and adapted. You begin to envision modifications, improvements, entirely new approaches to the tactical problems that define steppe warfare. You're not just absorbing existing knowledge. You're starting to innovate, to see possibilities that haven't been explored yet. By your 16th birthday, your reputation has spread beyond your immediate tribe. Word reaches Temujin's growing confederation that among the Uriankai lives a young man with an unusual mind for warfare, someone who sees patterns others miss and who might be worth recruiting. You don't know it yet, but your childhood is ending and your real education is about to begin. The forests that raised you have taught you to think systematically, to read complex situations quickly, to find solutions to apparently impossible problems. These skills will serve you well in the larger world, where the stakes are higher but the basic principles remain the same. Observe carefully, think several moves ahead, and never stop adapting to changing circumstances. The message arrives on a morning when frost still clings to the grass, despite the advancing season. A Mongol messenger, weathered and serious, sits his horse with the casual excellence that marks all the steppe peoples. He bears an invitation, or perhaps a summons, from Temujin, the rising Khan who has begun to unite the scattered Mongol tribes under his banner. Your skills have been noted, your reputation has traveled, and you are wanted for service in what promises to become something far greater than another tribal confederation. Your father studies the message in the deliberate way he approaches all important decisions. The Uriankai have survived by avoiding entanglement in larger political movements, by remaining useful but neutral, by never committing fully to any side in the endless steppe conflicts. But he also understands that the world is changing, that neutrality may no longer be possible, that the skills he's seen developing in you need a larger stage than forest raids and hunting expeditions can provide. After 3 days of consideration, he gives his consent. The journey to Temujin's camp takes 8 days of hard riding across terrain that shifts from familiar forest to the endless grass seas of the true steppe. You've ridden these lands before, but never as a participant in the great game of tribal politics, never as someone whose decisions might affect more than a single hunting party or small raiding expedition. The weight of transition settles on you as the landscape opens up, as the horizons stretch farther than seems possible, as you begin to grasp the scale of the forces you're about to join. Temujin's camp proves larger and more organized than anything you've experienced. Hundreds of gurs spread across the steppe in carefully planned arrangements that reflect military organization rather than kinship groups. Horse herds stretch beyond counting, their movements controlled by riders who wheel and turn with precision that speaks of endless practice. The sound is constant but never chaotic, horses neighing, children playing, metal ringing against metal as weapons are sharpened and repaired. Adults discussing logistics, strategy, the 1,000 details that keep a mobile army functioning. Your first meeting with the future Genghis Khan occurs not in a formal audience, but during a practical demonstration. Temujin has heard reports of your tactical thinking, but he's not interested in theoretical discussions. Instead, he presents you with a problem. Scouts have reported that a hostile tribe has fortified a position on high ground and waits for his forces to attack. The position appears strong, the approaches are difficult, and a direct assault would be costly. What would you do? You study the description carefully, asking questions about terrain features, water sources, the enemy's probable supply lines, their likely escape routes. As you process the information, patterns begin to emerge in your mind. The strong position has weaknesses that aren't immediately obvious. Its elevation makes it visible from great distances. Its limited water supply creates vulnerability to extended siege. Its single line of retreat could become a trap if properly exploited. You outline an approach that combines deception, mobility, and patience, appearing to withdraw while actually positioning forces to cut off escape routes, then forcing surrender through thirst rather than assault. Temujin listens without interruption, his pale eyes fixed on your face as you explain your reasoning. When you finish, he asks pointed questions that probe the gaps in your plan, testing whether you've thought through potential complications. You answer each query, adjusting and refining your approach as new variables are introduced. Finally, he nods slowly and announces that you'll have opportunity to test your theories in practice. The situation you've just analyzed isn't hypothetical. 3 days later, you ride with the advance force that will implement your strategy. This is your first experience of warfare at the scale Temujin conducts it. Your first taste of coordinating multiple units across vast distances. Your first opportunity to see whether your theoretical knowledge translates into practical success. The responsibility weighs on you as you take position on a ridge overlooking the enemy's stronghold, watching through the pre-dawn darkness as scattered units move into assigned positions. The initial phase unfolds exactly as planned. Your main force approaches visibly, probes the enemy defenses, then withdraws in apparent frustration when the assault proves too costly. From the enemy's elevated position, they can observe this retreat clearly, can see the dust clouds raised by departing riders, can reasonably conclude that their defensive strategy has succeeded. What they cannot see are the smaller forces moving through dead ground, circling wide to positions that block potential escape routes, settling in for what they assume will be a brief wait before pursuing the defeated attackers. Picture yourself now in those crucial hours as your plan unfolds. You lie pressed against the cold earth on a hillside 2 miles from the enemy position, watching through gaps in the rocks as the final pieces of your strategy move into place. The sun climbs slowly toward noon, and you know that by now the enemy's water situation is becoming critical. They planned for a quick battle, not an extended siege. Their horses need water, their men need water, and the nearest source lies directly through positions your hidden forces now control. Your heart pounds steadily against your ribs, but your mind remains clear, calculating. This is not the random violence of traditional steppe warfare. This is chess played with living pieces across terrain that stretches for miles. Every movement has been planned, every contingency considered, every possible response anticipated and countered. You've created a situation where your enemy's strength becomes weakness, where their advantages transform into vulnerabilities. The surrender comes in the early afternoon, not through dramatic combat, but through the simple recognition that continued resistance means death by thirst. White flags appear on the enemy ramparts, and messengers ride down to negotiate terms. Your first major tactical victory achieves its objectives without a single casualty among your forces and minimal losses among the enemy. More importantly, it establishes your reputation as something beyond a promising young warrior. You're a tactical mind that can solve problems other commanders cannot even properly analyze. Temujin's reaction to your success proves characteristically practical. Rather than elaborate praise, he assigns you to increasingly complex problems, each designed to test different aspects of military thinking. You plan river crossings under hostile observation, organize supply lines across terrain with limited water sources, develop reconnaissance techniques that gather detailed intelligence without alerting enemies to your presence. Each assignment builds on previous lessons while introducing new variables, new challenges, new opportunities to innovate. Your position within the growing confederation reflects merit rather than birth, a revolutionary concept in a society where noble blood traditionally determines rank. But Temujin surrounds himself with competence regardless of its source, understanding that tribal prejudices are luxuries he cannot afford if he intends to achieve his larger ambitions. You find yourself working alongside other outsiders who have earned their positions through skill. Yebe the archer, who can split arrows at ranges others consider impossible. Mukali the strategist, whose understanding of siege warfare incorporates techniques learned from Chinese defectors. Jelme the logistics master, who can calculate exactly how many horses an army needs to cross any given terrain in any given time. Together, you begin to develop something unprecedented in steppe warfare, a systematic approach to military operations that combines traditional nomadic advantages with innovations borrowed from sedentary civilizations. The mobility and archery skills that have always characterized steppe warfare remain central, but they're enhanced by improved organization, better intelligence gathering, more sophisticated logistics, and tactical flexibility that allows rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. Your role evolves naturally toward what later generations will call grand strategy, the art of coordinating multiple campaigns across vast distances to achieve overarching political objectives. While other commanders focus on individual battles, you begin thinking in terms of entire theaters of operations, understanding how victory in one region creates opportunities in another, how apparent retreats can be strategic advances, how the appearance of weakness can mask overwhelming strength. The education continues through a series of campaigns against tribes that refuse to join Temujin's confederation. Each conflict provides opportunities to test new ideas, refine existing techniques, learn from both successes and failures. You develop a reputation for achieving objectives with minimal losses, for finding solutions to apparently impossible tactical problems, for seeing opportunities that other commanders miss entirely. More importantly, you begin to understand how military success translates into political power, how tactical victories can reshape entire societies. Your relationship with Temujin deepens as he recognizes that your loyalty stems not from personal ambition, but from genuine belief in his vision of a united steppe people. You understand better than most of his followers what he's attempting to create, not merely another tribal confederation that will fragment when he dies, but a permanent transformation of nomadic society into something capable of challenging the great sedentary empires. Your tactical skills serve this larger purpose, making you not just a successful general, but a crucial architect of the future Mongol Empire. By your 25th birthday, you've participated in dozens of successful campaigns and helped develop many of the tactical innovations that will make Mongol armies virtually unbeatable. But the real test lies ahead, as Temujin prepares to transform himself from successful tribal leader into Genghis Khan, universal ruler of the Mongol peoples. The skills you've learned during these formative years, tactical thinking, strategic planning, organizational innovation, will soon be tested on a scale that dwarfs anything the steppe peoples have previously attempted. As you stand in your ger on the night before Temujin's enthronement as Great Khan, reviewing maps that show territories far beyond traditional Mongol boundaries, you understand that your apprenticeship is ending and your real career is about to begin. The child who tracked wounded bears through forest undergrowth has become a tactical genius capable of moving armies across continents. The lessons learned in childhood, reading signs, thinking ahead, adapting to circumstances, remain relevant, but the scale has expanded beyond anything your younger self could have imagined. Tomorrow you will swear allegiance to Genghis Khan and receive command responsibilities that will test everything you've learned. The steppe has forged you into a weapon more deadly than any sword, more precise than any arrow. Soon the world will discover what the Mongols have created in their endless grass seas, and you will be among the primary instruments of that discovery. The Great Assembly, the Kurultai, stretches across the steppe like a city of felt and leather, 10,000 jirs arranged in precise military formation under skies so vast they seem to swallow sound itself. Representatives from every Mongol tribe that has bent the knee gather to witness history. The transformation of Temujin, successful tribal leader, into Genghis Khan, ruler of all peoples who live in felt tents. You stand among the inner circle of commanders as sacred shamans perform rituals that blend ancient tradition with immediate political necessity, legitimizing what force and cunning have already accomplished. But even as you participate in ceremony, your mind works on practical problems. Unity achieved through conquest must be maintained through organization, and organization requires systematic thinking about military structure, communication methods, supply systems, and the thousand other details that separate a successful tribal confederation from a world-conquering empire. Genghis Khan understands this as clearly as you do, which explains why your role within his government extends far beyond battlefield tactics into the fundamental architecture of Mongol power. The decimal military system emerges from these discussions as perhaps your most significant organizational innovation. Traditional steppe armies organized around kinship groups and personal loyalties, creating units of inconsistent size and uncertain reliability. Your system divides all forces into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 warriors, with promotion based on merit rather than birth and loyalty, flowing upward through clear chains of command. This creates unprecedented coordination capabilities while breaking tribal bonds that might threaten central authority. You spend months traveling between scattered Mongol camps, implementing this new organization, resolving disputes that arise when traditional hierarchies clash with merit-based advancement, ensuring that every unit understands its place within the larger structure. The work proves exhausting but essential. You're not just reorganizing an army, you're rebuilding Mongol society itself around principles of efficiency and competence rather than custom and privilege. The first major test of these innovations comes when Genghis Khan decides to move against the Western Xia, the Tangut kingdom that controls crucial trade routes between Mongolia and China proper. This campaign will serve multiple purposes: testing the new military organization under combat conditions, securing tribute and plunder to reward supporters, and demonstrating Mongol capabilities to potential enemies. Most importantly for you, it provides opportunity to develop the siege warfare techniques that will prove essential for conquering fortified civilizations. Traditional steppe warfare avoided siege operations because nomadic armies lacked the equipment and patience required to reduce fortified positions. But if the Mongols intend to challenge great empires, they must master techniques for taking cities and castles. You approach this problem with characteristic thoroughness, recruiting Chinese engineers and siege specialists, studying captured technical manuals, experimenting with adaptations of existing technology to nomadic warfare requirements. Your solution combines nomadic mobility with settled people's engineering expertise in ways that surprise enemies who expect raiders rather than systematic conquerors. Mongol armies still move faster than any enemy anticipates, still strike where and when opponents least expect attack. But now they also carry siege equipment, technical specialists, and detailed intelligence about target fortifications. Cities that expect to withstand months of siege find themselves under assault by forces that combine traditional steppe advantages with sophisticated engineering capabilities. Picture yourself during the siege of Wuhai, the Western Xia fortress that guards one of the main passes into Tangut territory. You stand on a hill overlooking walls that rise 40 feet from the desert floor, watching as your engineers position catapults and trebuchets with mathematical precision. The air shimmers with heat, and dust devils dance across ground baked hard as stone. Your mouth tastes of alkali and horse sweat, and the constant wind carries the sound of hammering as your specialists assemble siege equipment piece by piece. This is your laboratory, your chance to test theoretical knowledge against practical reality. Every decision matters, the positioning of artillery to maximize effectiveness while minimizing vulnerability to counterattack, the timing of assaults to exploit weaknesses created by bombardment, the psychological pressure applied through demonstrations of overwhelming force. You're writing the textbook for nomadic siege warfare, learning through experience what works and what fails when mobility meets fortification. Your mind processes dozens of variables simultaneously: wind direction affecting projectile accuracy, soil composition determining where tunnels can be dug, water sources that might be diverted to create tactical advantages, escape routes that might be blocked to prevent reinforcement or resupply. The siege becomes a chess game played with engineering equipment and human lives, where each move creates opportunities for the next, and victory comes to those who can think furthest ahead. The fortress falls within 6 days, not through starvation or exhaustion, but through systematic application of technical superiority and tactical innovation. Your combination of bombardment, infiltration, and psychological pressure creates conditions where continued resistance becomes pointless, rather than merely difficult. The garrison surrenders not because they lack courage, but because they recognize mathematical certainty. Your forces have solved the tactical problem their fortification was designed to present. This victory establishes a pattern that will characterize Mongol expansion for decades: swift movement, overwhelming concentration of force, technical innovation, and willingness to adapt tactics to specific circumstances. Enemies who prepare for traditional steppe raids find themselves facing systematic military operations that combine multiple approaches to achieving clearly defined objectives. The speed of conquest surprises everyone, including some of your own commanders who expected campaigns to take years rather than months. Your reputation within the Mongol hierarchy solidifies as other generals recognize that your success stems not from luck or limited tactical cleverness, but from fundamental understanding of how warfare works at strategic levels. Genghis Khan begins consulting you on matters far beyond individual campaigns: the organization of conquered territories, the integration of defeated peoples into Mongol military structure, the long-term planning required to sustain operations across vast distances and extended time periods. These broader responsibilities reveal the loneliness that accompanies supreme military command. Few people possess the knowledge base required to understand your strategic thinking. Fewer still have the experience necessary to offer meaningful criticism or suggestion. You find yourself increasingly isolated by competence, surrounded by capable subordinates who nonetheless cannot fully grasp the complexity of the problems you're solving or the elegance of the solutions you devise. Yet this isolation breeds its own form of clarity. Without the distraction of constant consultation and debate, your mind operates with crystalline focus on essential strategic requirements. You begin to see patterns across entire theaters of operation, understanding how individual battles fit into campaign objectives, how campaigns serve larger political purposes, how political success creates conditions for future military operations. Your thinking operates at scales that encompass years and continents, rather than days and battlefields. The success against Western Xia opens new possibilities that stretch far beyond traditional Mongol ambitions. Tributary relationships established through conquest provide resources for larger enterprises, while demonstrated military capabilities create reputation effects that precede your armies and often accomplish objectives without fighting. Enemies who might have resisted traditional raiders surrender to forces they recognize as qualitatively different, systematically superior to anything they've previously encountered. Genghis Khan increasingly relies on your counsel for decisions that will shape the empire's future development. Should conquered territories be governed directly or through client rulers? How can Mongol military advantages be maintained while incorporating settled peoples' technical expertise? What combination of intimidation and incentive will most effectively ensure long-term loyalty from diverse populations? These questions require thinking that goes beyond tactical considerations to address fundamental problems of imperial administration. Your answers reflect the same systematic approach that characterizes your military thinking. Government structures should be efficient rather than traditional. Promotion should depend on merit rather than birth. Policies should serve practical objectives rather than abstract principles. The empire you're helping to design will be a machine for converting military success into sustained political control, for transforming nomadic advantages into administrative capabilities that can govern sedentary civilizations. As you approach your 35th birthday, your position within the Mongol Empire has evolved far beyond anything your forest-dwelling ancestors could have imagined. You've become not just a general, but an architect of imperial policy, not just a tactical innovator, but a strategic planner whose decisions affect millions of people across vast territories. The skills learned during childhood, observation, analysis, adaptation, remain central to everything you do, but their application now operates at world historical scales. The campaigns ahead will test these capabilities against the greatest military challenges any nomadic people have ever attempted. Jin China, with its millions of inhabitants and sophisticated defenses, the Khwarezmian Empire, with its control of Central Asian trade routes, eventually Europe itself, with its heavy cavalry and fortified cities. Each will require new innovations, new adaptations, new solutions to tactical and strategic problems that have never been solved before. But as you review maps that show territories stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, you understand that your apprenticeship in empire building has prepared you for exactly these challenges. The mind that learned to track wounded bears through forest undergrowth can surely learn to track enemy armies across continents. The strategic thinking that solved siege problems in desert fortresses can surely solve the larger puzzles presented by great civilizations. The organizational innovations that transform tribal warriors into disciplined units can surely be applied to governing territories larger than any previous empire. Tomorrow's challenges will dwarf today's accomplishments, but you face them with confidence born from systematic preparation and proven capability. The Great Khan has shown the world that Mongol power extends far beyond traditional steppe boundaries. Now you must show the world that Mongol genius extends even further than Mongol power, that the people who emerged from grass seas and forest edges possess not just military superiority, but organizational brilliance capable of reshaping human civilization itself. The Jin dynasty represents everything the settled world considers permanent and unassailable. For nearly a century, the Jurchen rulers have governed northern China from their capital at Zhongdu, controlling millions of subjects through bureaucracies refined over centuries, protected by walls that stretch for thousands of miles and fortifications that embody the most advanced military engineering on Earth. Their armies number in the hundreds of thousands, their generals study strategic classics written by masters like Sun Tzu. Their resources seem limitless compared to any force the steppes have previously mustered. Yet as you study captured maps and intelligence reports in your Jia outside the frontier fortress of Zhuyongguan, you see not strength but rigidity, not security but vulnerability disguised as impregnability. The Jin Empire's greatest assets, its size, its population, its administrative complexity, can be transformed into weaknesses by enemies who understand how to exploit them. Walls designed to keep out raiding parties become traps when the enemy refuses to exhaust himself against stone and mortar. Vast armies become liabilities when they cannot move fast enough to respond to threats that materialize and vanish like morning mist. Genghis Khan has assigned you responsibility for developing the strategy that will bring down this ancient civilization, trusting your proven ability to see solutions where others see only impossible obstacles. The magnitude of the challenge exhilarates rather than intimidates you. This is the ultimate test of everything you've learned about warfare, organization, and the systematic application of nomadic advantages against sedentary vulnerabilities. Your approach combines traditional Mongol strengths with innovations specifically designed to neutralize Chinese defensive advantages. Speed and mobility remain central, but they're enhanced by intelligence networks that provide detailed information about enemy movements, supply systems that allow sustained operations far from traditional grazing grounds, and siege capabilities that can reduce fortified positions without becoming bogged down in lengthy blockades. The campaign begins not with dramatic assaults, but with systematic isolation of border fortresses, cutting communication lines and supply routes until strongholds that appeared impregnable become islands of resistance surrounded by Mongol-controlled territory. Your forces avoid costly direct attacks, instead creating conditions where continued resistance becomes pointless, and surrender offers the only realistic survival option. Picture yourself during the siege of Xuandua, watching from a carefully chosen observation post as your engineers position siege equipment with mathematical precision. The morning sun casts long shadows across ground scarred by weeks of preparation, and the air carries the acrid smell of burning pitch mixed with dust kicked up by thousands of hooves. Your hands rest steady on the pommel of your sword as you observe the final preparations for an assault that will test every innovation you've developed in siege warfare. This is not the random violence that characterized earlier steppe warfare. Every catapult placement has been calculated to maximize damage while minimizing exposure to counter-battery fire. Every approach route has been surveyed to identify dead ground where assault troops can advance without observation. Every timing sequence has been rehearsed until coordination between units operates with clockwork precision. You've transformed siege warfare from a test of endurance into a demonstration of superior engineering and tactical coordination. Your mind processes the unfolding operation like a master musician conducting a complex symphony. The initial bombardment will create breaches at predetermined points, drawing defenders to repair efforts that expose them to follow-up attacks. Simultaneously, diversionary assaults at secondary locations will prevent enemy commanders from concentrating their forces effectively. Finally, the main assault will exploit weaknesses created by these preliminary operations, achieving penetration before defenders can reorganize their response. The fortress falls in 18 hours, not through exhaustion or starvation, but through systematic application of superior tactics and technology. Your combination of mobility, engineering expertise, and psychological pressure creates conditions where continued resistance becomes mathematically impossible rather than merely difficult. The garrison surrenders because they recognize that your forces have solved every problem their fortification was designed to present. This victory establishes patterns that will characterize the entire Jin campaign. Chinese commanders, trained in defensive strategies that assume attackers will follow predictable approaches, find themselves facing enemies who operate according to entirely different principles. Mongol armies appear where they're not expected, strike when they're not anticipated, withdraw before effective responses can be organized, then return to exploit weaknesses revealed during earlier probes. Your reputation among Chinese military professionals evolves from dismissive contempt to grudging respect to genuine fear as they realize they're facing tactical innovation that renders traditional defensive thinking obsolete. Intelligence reports describe you not as another barbarian raider, but as a strategic mind that combines nomadic advantages with systematic understanding of siege warfare, logistics, and the complex coordination required to operate multiple armies across vast theaters. The psychological impact of your successes proves almost as important as their direct military consequences. Cities that might have resisted for months surrender after token resistance when they understand that prolonged defense merely delays inevitable conquest while ensuring harsher treatment for survivors. Your reputation precedes your armies, often accomplishing strategic objectives without fighting and conserving resources for operations where combat remains necessary. The campaign reaches its climax with the siege of Zhongdu itself, the Jin capital that houses over 1 million inhabitants behind walls designed by the finest military engineers in the world. This fortress represents the ultimate test of your siege warfare innovations, the final proof that nomadic armies can indeed challenge the greatest achievements of sedentary military architecture. Your approach to this ultimate challenge reflects the maturation of your strategic thinking over more than a decade of continuous warfare. Rather than attempting immediate assault against prepared positions, you begin with systematic isolation of the capital, cutting supply lines and eliminating relief forces until the city becomes dependent entirely on internal resources. Your intelligence network, now extending throughout northern China, provides detailed information about food stocks, water supplies, military preparations, and civilian morale. The siege operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Military pressure through bombardment and systematic destruction of outer defenses, combines with economic warfare that disrupts trade and tribute collection, diplomatic initiatives that encourage defection among Jin allies, and psychological operations designed to undermine defender morale. You've created a comprehensive approach to siege warfare that addresses every aspect of defensive strength, rather than simply attempting to overwhelm fortifications through brute force. Standing on a hill overlooking Zhengdu's massive walls, as autumn mists rise from the surrounding marshlands, you understand that this moment represents the culmination of everything you've learned about warfare since childhood. The tactical principles first glimpsed while tracking wounded animals through forest undergrowth have evolved into strategic capabilities that can bring down civilizations. The organizational innovations developed during tribal conflicts now coordinate armies larger than entire populations of traditional nomadic societies. Your heart beats steadily as you observe the final preparations for what you know will be the decisive phase of the campaign. Years of planning, months of preparation, weeks of systematic pressure have created conditions where victory has become inevitable. The great fortress that symbolizes Chinese military power will fall not through luck or desperate heroism, but through systematic application of superior strategic thinking and organizational capability. The city's surrender comes not as dramatic climax, but as logical conclusion to mathematical calculation. Food supplies exhausted, relief armies defeated, outer defenses systematically reduced, the Jin commanders recognize that continued resistance serves no purpose beyond prolonging suffering. The negotiations that follow establish your reputation not just as conqueror, but as magnanimous victor who understands that destroyed cities serve no useful purpose in imperial administration. Your success against the Jin dynasty transforms Mongol capabilities in ways that extend far beyond territorial conquest. Tribute from the defeated empire provides resources for even larger enterprises, while demonstrated ability to reduce the most sophisticated fortifications in the world creates reputation effects that precede Mongol armies and often achieve objectives without fighting. Technical specialists recruited from Chinese military services enhance siege capabilities that were already superior to anything nomadic peoples had previously possessed. More importantly, the campaign establishes your personal reputation as something beyond merely successful general. Chinese chronicles will record your tactical innovations with respectful attention to detail, recognizing that they've witnessed military genius operating at world historical levels. Your name becomes synonymous with inevitable victory, with strategic thinking that operates several moves ahead of any opponent, with organizational capability that can coordinate complex operations across vast distances and extended time periods. As winter settles over the conquered territories, and you review maps that now show Mongol control extending from traditional steppe boundaries deep into the heart of Chinese civilization, you understand that your education in empire building has reached new levels of sophistication. The skills that sufficed for tribal warfare and nomadic raids have evolved into capabilities required for governing sedentary populations, integrating diverse military traditions, and planning operations that will span continents. The Jin campaign proves that nomadic advantages, properly applied, can overcome any defensive system devised by settled civilizations. But even as you celebrate this achievement, your mind turns toward larger challenges that await beyond the horizon. The Khwarezmian Empire controls Central Asian trade routes and commands resources that dwarf even Chinese wealth. European kingdoms possess military traditions and fortification techniques that may require entirely new tactical approaches. The world beyond China remains largely unconquered, largely unknown, largely unprepared for what Mongol military genius can accomplish when applied systematically to problems of global conquest. Your transformation from forest-dwelling tribesman to architect of imperial expansion continues, driven by the same intellectual curiosity that once led you to track wounded bears through unfamiliar terrain. But now the terrain spans continents, the prey includes entire civilizations, and the stakes involve nothing less than the fundamental reorganization of human political relationships. The greatest campaigns lie ahead, and you face them with confidence born from systematic preparation and proven capability at every level of military and administrative challenge. The messenger arrives bloodied and exhausted, his horse nearly dead beneath him, carrying news that transforms routine campaign planning into the greatest strategic challenge of your career. Jalal ad-Din, the surviving prince of the Khwarezmian dynasty, has escaped the destruction of his father's empire with a core of loyal troops and now threatens to rebuild resistance to Mongol rule from bases in India and Afghanistan. Genghis Khan's orders are characteristically direct: pursue, engage, destroy. The survival of effective opposition leadership cannot be tolerated when the empire's expansion depends on the reputation of Mongol invincibility. But this assignment differs fundamentally from previous campaigns in scope, complexity, and the strategic implications of failure. Jalal ad-Din commands perhaps 30,000 veterans who know the terrain intimately, possess excellent intelligence networks, and can move rapidly through regions where local populations may provide support. Your pursuit force numbers fewer than 20,000 riders, operates far from traditional supply bases, and must traverse territories where every geographical feature favors defenders over attackers. Most challenging of all, you must maintain pursuit across distances that stretch beyond any previous nomadic military operation, through terrain that ranges from desert wasteland to mountain passes to tropical river deltas. Your approach to this unprecedented challenge reflects the evolution of your strategic thinking, from tactical problem-solving to comprehensive campaign planning that addresses every aspect of sustained military operations. Intelligence gathering becomes as important as battlefield tactics, logistics planning as crucial as combat leadership, diplomatic coordination as essential as military coordination. You're not just hunting an enemy army, you're conducting a strategic pursuit that will demonstrate whether Mongol organizational capabilities can operate effectively at truly global scales. The pursuit begins in the ruins of Samarkand, where scattered intelligence reports suggest Jalal ad-Din's initial direction of retreat. Your advance guard spreads across a front nearly 100 miles wide, gathering information from merchants, refugees, local officials, anyone who might have observed the passage of a large military force. The systematic approach to intelligence collection that served you well during siege operations now expands to cover territories larger than entire kingdoms, requiring coordination between dozens of reconnaissance units operating independently across vast distances. Picture yourself during those first crucial weeks, standing in your command tent as reports flow in from scouts scattered across Central Asia. Maps spread before you show terrain features, water sources, probable routes, political boundaries that mean nothing to your pursuit, but everything to the populations whose cooperation or resistance may determine success. Your mind processes information like a master craftsman working precious metal, extracting patterns from apparently random data, identifying the logical choices available to a fleeing enemy commander. The trail leads southeast toward the Hindu Kush, through mountain passes where ambush opportunities favor defenders and where winter weather can trap pursuing armies in terrain that becomes impassable until spring. Jalal ad-Din clearly hopes to use geographical advantages to offset numerical and organizational disadvantages, drawing your forces into regions where Mongol mobility becomes liability rather than asset. This is precisely the kind of strategic thinking you've learned to anticipate and counter through systematic analysis of enemy options and careful preparation for multiple contingencies. Your response combines pursuit pressure that prevents enemy reorganization with advanced planning that ensures your forces can operate effectively regardless of geographical challenges. Supply bases established at regular intervals provide resources for extended operations, while intelligence networks developed through local contacts provide early warning of enemy movements. Most importantly, your pursuit operates according to calculated strategic logic rather than simple following, anticipating enemy destinations rather than merely reacting to enemy movements. The chase extends across Afghanistan into India, through territories that challenge every assumption about nomadic military capabilities. Desert crossings test logistics systems designed for steppe operations. Mountain warfare requires tactical innovations for terrain that channels movement into predictable routes. Tropical climates create health challenges that traditional Mongol medicine cannot address effectively. Yet your forces adapt systematically to each new environment, incorporating local knowledge while maintaining organizational advantages that distinguish professional armies from tribal warbands. The psychological pressure of continuous pursuit proves as important as direct military pressure in achieving strategic objectives. Jalal ad-Din's forces cannot rest, cannot reorganize, cannot recruit effectively when they're constantly moving to avoid contact with pursuers who anticipate their movements and appear wherever they attempt to establish temporary bases. The systematic nature of your pursuit creates conditions where enemy options become increasingly limited, regardless of geographical advantages or local support. Your mind operates at peak efficiency during this extended campaign, processing information about terrain, weather, enemy capabilities, local politics, supply requirements, and dozens of other variables that determine success or failure in operations conducted far from traditional support bases. The intellectual challenge exhilarates rather than exhausts you. This is the ultimate test of strategic thinking, applied to problems that push nomadic military organization beyond all previous boundaries. The climactic engagement occurs not where Jalal ad-Din chooses to make his stand, but where your strategic calculations force him to accept battle under conditions that favor your tactical approach. Months of pursuit have driven enemy forces into regions where geographical advantages become meaningless because pursuit pressure has prevented effective utilization of defensive terrain. The battle itself proves almost anticlimactic. Your systematic approach to strategic pursuit has already achieved decisive results before tactical contact occurs. Standing on the battlefield as dust settles over scattered enemy equipment and your troops secure prisoners, you understand that this campaign represents something unprecedented in military history. You've demonstrated that nomadic organizational capabilities can sustain complex operations across continental distances, that systematic strategic thinking can overcome any geographical advantage, that professional military competence can adapt to any terrain or climate. The pursuit of Jalal ad-Din proves that Mongol power recognizes no boundaries, acknowledges no limitations, accepts no constraints on its global reach. Your reputation among both allies and enemies transforms during this campaign from respected general to something approaching mythical status. Chinese chronicles describe your strategic capabilities with awe that borders on superstition. Muslim historians record your tactical innovations with grudging admiration. Indian courtiers speak of your organizational genius with fear that reflects genuine understanding of what they've witnessed. You've become synonymous with inevitable victory, with strategic thinking that operates beyond conventional military understanding, with organizational capability that can project nomadic power across any distance. But the personal cost of this achievement becomes apparent during quiet moments, when the immediate pressures of command allow reflection on what you've accomplished and what it required. The loneliness of supreme strategic responsibility has deepened during months when your decisions affected thousands of lives, while few subordinates possessed sufficient knowledge to offer meaningful counsel. The mental strain of continuous calculation, anticipation, and adaptation has pushed your intellectual capabilities to their absolute limits. The physical demands of campaign leadership across impossible distances have aged you in ways that will never completely heal. Yet as you review maps that now show Mongol control extending from the Pacific Ocean to the Arabian Sea, you understand that this campaign has established your legacy as history's greatest strategic mind. The tactical innovations developed during tribal conflicts have evolved into strategic capabilities that can reshape global political relationships. The organizational systems created for steppe warfare now demonstrate effectiveness at scales that encompass multiple continents and diverse civilizations. The pursuit of Jalal ad-Din concludes with your forces positioned for operations that will extend Mongol power even further beyond traditional boundaries. Intelligence networks established during the campaign provide detailed information about European military capabilities, while diplomatic contacts developed through local intermediaries create opportunities for political initiatives that may achieve objectives without fighting. The systematic approach to strategic pursuit has revealed vulnerabilities in settled civilizations that suggest even greater conquests may be possible for forces that understand how to exploit them. Your transformation from tribal warrior to global strategic planner continues, driven by intellectual curiosity that finds unlimited scope for development in challenges that span continents and involve the fundamental reorganization of human political relationships. The greatest tests still lie ahead, but you face them with capabilities proven at every level of military and administrative complexity. The mind that once tracked wounded animals through forest undergrowth now tracks enemy armies across continents with equal precision and infinitely greater consequences for world history. The reports filtering back from your reconnaissance expedition into European territories read like descriptions of an alien world. Jebe's riders have probed deep into Georgia, Armenia, and the Russian principalities, gathering intelligence that reveals military systems fundamentally different from anything encountered in previous campaigns. European warfare centers on heavy cavalry charges supported by fortified positions, crossbow technology that can penetrate any armor at close range, and tactical doctrines that emphasize individual combat skills over coordinated unit movements. Most intriguingly, European political organization appears even more fragmented than pre-unification Mongolia, with dozens of independent kingdoms, principalities, and city-states that maintain only loose defensive alliances. As you study captured weapons, interview prisoners, and analyze detailed reports from your scouts, patterns emerge that suggest unprecedented opportunities for nomadic tactical advantages. European heavy cavalry, despite its individual effectiveness, operates with limited mobility and requires extensive logistical support that becomes vulnerability when supply lines are threatened. European fortifications, while impressively engineered, are designed to withstand siege techniques that rely on gradual reduction rather than systematic coordination between mobility, engineering, and psychological pressure. Most importantly, European military doctrine appears to assume that enemies will follow conventional approaches to warfare, creating opportunities for tactical innovations that exploit assumptions rather than challenging capabilities directly. Genghis Khan's decision to authorize full-scale European operations reflects his confidence in your strategic planning and his understanding that Mongol expansion has reached a point where continued success requires challenges that test organizational capabilities at their absolute limits. The distances involved dwarf even the pursuit of Jalal ad-Din. The terrain includes obstacles that will require entirely new tactical approaches, and the enemy represents military traditions that have never been systematically tested against nomadic warfare. This campaign will either establish Mongol power as truly global or reveal limitations that could threaten the empire's continued expansion. Your preliminary planning for European operations reflects lessons learned during previous campaigns, while adapting to unique challenges presented by unfamiliar terrain and enemy capabilities. Intelligence networks must be established across territories where nomadic peoples have never operated. Supply systems must function across distances that stretch traditional logistics beyond all previous boundaries, and tactical innovations must address enemy capabilities that differ fundamentally from those encountered in Asian campaigns. The initial phase unfolds exactly as your strategic analysis predicted. European armies, trained for combat against enemies who follow predictable tactical doctrines, prove completely unprepared for Mongol mobility, coordination, and systematic approach to battlefield problem-solving. Individual encounters demonstrate European courage and skill, but these advantages become meaningless when your forces refuse to engage under conditions that favor enemy strengths, while systematically exploiting weaknesses that European military doctrine cannot address. Picture yourself during the battle at the Kalka River, the engagement that will introduce Europe to the reality of Mongol military superiority. You stand on elevated ground overlooking a battlefield that stretches for miles along the riverbank, watching as the final elements of your tactical plan move into position. The morning air carries the sound of thousands of horses moving in perfect coordination, the whisper of arrows being fitted to bowstrings, the quiet commands that coordinate complex maneuvers across terrain that European commanders consider impossible for cavalry operations. Your heart beats with the steady rhythm of absolute confidence as you observe enemy formations moving into positions that your strategic planning has anticipated and countered months in advance. The combined Russian and Cuman force represents everything European military tradition considers unbeatable. Heavy cavalry with excellent individual training, crossbow units with superior range and penetration, defensive positions that utilize terrain advantages effectively. Yet every strength they possess has been analyzed, understood, and systematically neutralized by tactical innovations they cannot comprehend because they've never encountered anything similar. The engagement unfolds like a demonstration rather than a battle. Your initial assault draws enemy heavy cavalry into pursuit that separates them from supporting units, exposing them to coordinated arrow storms that inflict casualties while avoiding direct contact. European attempts to force close combat fail because your forces maintain mobility advantages that allow tactical withdrawal whenever enemy strength threaten to achieve effectiveness. Most devastating of all, your systematic coordination between multiple units creates tactical situations where European commanders cannot predict your responses because their military education provides no framework for understanding how nomadic warfare operates. The decisive moment comes not through dramatic charge or heroic individual combat, but through mathematical inevitability created by superior strategic planning and tactical coordination. European forces, trained for warfare that emphasizes courage and individual skill, find themselves facing enemies who operate according to entirely different principles. The battle becomes a demonstration that individual excellence cannot overcome systematic superiority, that traditional tactical doctrines become weaknesses when confronted by innovations they were never designed to address. Standing among the scattered remains of what European chroniclers will describe as their finest military force, you understand that this engagement has accomplished far more than tactical victory. You've proven that European military capabilities, despite their reputation and their success against traditional enemies, cannot effectively challenge nomadic organizational advantages when properly applied. The implications extend far beyond this single battlefield to suggest that European civilization as a whole may be vulnerable to systematic conquest by forces that understand how to exploit its military and political weaknesses. Your reputation among European courts evolves rapidly from curiosity to concern to genuine terror as intelligence reports describe tactical capabilities that exceed anything in their historical experience. Mongol warfare operates according to principles that European military education cannot address because it challenges fundamental assumptions about how battles should be fought and won. Your systematic approach to coordination, your ability to maintain control over scattered units across vast distances, your innovations in mobility and logistics represent qualitative advantages that no amount of traditional military training can counter effectively. The psychological impact of your success proves almost as important as its direct military consequences. European kingdoms that might have resisted traditional raiders recognize that they're facing something unprecedented: military capabilities that can operate effectively across any terrain and against any defensive system. Your reputation precedes your armies, often accomplishing strategic objectives without fighting and creating conditions where continued resistance appears pointless, rather than merely difficult. The intelligence you gather during this campaign provides detailed information about European political organization, military capabilities, economic systems, and geographical features that will prove essential for planning larger operations. European civilization proves even more fragmented than your initial estimates suggested, with political boundaries that create opportunities for diplomatic manipulation and military vulnerabilities that systematic conquest could exploit. Most importantly, European military doctrine shows no evidence of adaptation to nomadic tactical innovations, suggesting that larger campaigns could achieve objectives that seem impossible based on simple numerical comparisons. Your analysis of European strengths and weaknesses reveals a civilization that has achieved impressive individual capabilities while neglecting systematic approaches to military organization and strategic planning. European knights represent perhaps the finest individual warriors in the world. European siege engines demonstrate advanced engineering capabilities. European fortifications show sophisticated understanding of defensive architecture. Yet these individual strengths are not integrated into coherent strategic systems, creating vulnerabilities that nomadic organizational advantages can exploit systematically. As you prepare for withdrawal to Mongolia, carrying intelligence and tribute that demonstrate the success of your reconnaissance in force, you understand that this campaign has established foundations for future operations that could extend Mongol power across the entire European continent. The tactical innovations tested against European armies prove effective beyond your most optimistic estimates, while the strategic intelligence gathered reveals opportunities for conquest that dwarf anything previously attempted by nomadic peoples. Your reputation within the Mongol hierarchy reaches new heights as other commanders recognize that your European campaign has opened possibilities that extend Mongol strategic options in unprecedented directions. Genghis Khan increasingly relies on your counsel for planning that addresses not just immediate tactical problems, but long-term strategic objectives that may require decades to accomplish fully. Your thinking operates at scales that encompass multiple continents and diverse civilizations, understanding how victory in one theater creates opportunities in others, and how systematic conquest can reshape global political relationships. The European reconnaissance concludes with your forces positioned for future operations, while your mind turns toward even larger challenges that await beyond the immediate horizon. The intelligence gathered during this campaign suggests that European military capabilities, despite their reputation, cannot effectively challenge systematic Mongol conquest when properly planned and executed. The psychological preparation of European populations through demonstrated military superiority creates conditions where future campaigns may achieve objectives through reputation rather than prolonged fighting. Your transformation from tribal warrior to global strategic architect continues, driven by intellectual challenges that find unlimited scope for development in problems that span continents and involve the fundamental reorganization of human political relationships across multiple civilizations. The greatest campaigns still lie ahead, but you face them with capabilities proven at every level of military and administrative complexity. With reputation that precedes your armies and often accomplishes objectives before battles begin. 15 years have passed since your reconnaissance revealed European vulnerabilities. 15 years during which your reputation has grown into something that transcends ordinary military achievement to become a force of nature in European consciousness. Chroniclers from Kiev to Paris write of the Mongol general whose tactical genius defies comprehension, whose organizational capabilities can coordinate armies across distances that span continents, whose strategic planning operates decades in advance of immediate military requirements. Now, with Ögedei Khan's blessing and the full resources of an empire that stretches from Korea to the Caspian Sea, you return to Europe not as scout, but as conqueror. The scale of this operation dwarfs anything previously attempted in the history of warfare. 3 separate armies totaling nearly 150,000 warriors advance along coordinated routes that will converge on target regions with mathematical precision. Your northern force moves through Poland toward the Baltic coast. Batu Khan's central army advances through Hungary toward the Danube basin, while your southern units operate through Moldavia and Wallachia toward the Black Sea approaches. The coordination required to maintain tactical control over forces separated by hundreds of miles represents the ultimate test of nomadic organizational capabilities developed over decades of continuous innovation. Your strategic plan for European conquest reflects everything you've learned about systematic warfare during 30 years of continuous campaigning. Rather than attempting immediate occupation of vast territories, you focus on destroying European military capabilities while creating conditions that will make resistance psychologically impossible and politically pointless. European armies must be eliminated. European fortifications must be demonstrated to be meaningless obstacles. European political leadership must be shown to be incapable of providing effective protection for their populations. The campaign begins with simultaneous operations designed to prevent European coordination and maximize psychological impact. While your forces advance along predetermined routes, diplomatic missions offer terms to kingdoms willing to submit without resistance. Intelligence networks provide detailed information about enemy preparations and political relationships, and systematic psychological warfare creates atmosphere of inevitable doom that often accomplishes objectives before military pressure becomes necessary. Picture yourself during the final preparations for the Battle of Mohi, the engagement that will establish Mongol dominance over European military capabilities once and for all. You stand in your command tent as the pre-dawn darkness slowly gives way to pale morning light, reviewing maps that show every unit position, every geographical feature, every tactical consideration that will determine the outcome of what you know will be the decisive engagement of the entire European campaign. Your mind operates with crystalline clarity as you verify that months of planning have created conditions for victory that approach mathematical certainty. The Hungarian army represents Europe's finest military capabilities: heavily armored knights with excellent training, crossbow units with superior equipment, defensive positions that utilize terrain advantages effectively, numerical equality that should theoretically balance nomadic mobility advantages. Yet every strength they possess has been systematically analyzed and countered through tactical innovations they cannot anticipate, because their military experience provides no framework for understanding nomadic warfare at this level of sophistication. The night attack that opens the battle demonstrates the maturation of your tactical thinking over decades of continuous warfare. European armies, trained for daylight combat according to chivalric traditions that emphasize individual recognition and glory, prove completely unprepared for coordinated assault that achieves objectives through systematic pressure rather than dramatic confrontation. Your forces penetrate Hungarian defensive positions without triggering alarm, position siege equipment without detection, coordinate complex maneuvers in complete darkness using communication methods that European military doctrine cannot comprehend. Your heart pounds with anticipation rather than anxiety as you observe the final phase of tactical preparation. Years of planning, months of systematic approach, weeks of careful positioning have created conditions where European military resistance becomes futile, regardless of individual courage or traditional tactical competence. You've engineered a demonstration that will establish Mongol military superiority beyond any possibility of European denial or rationalization. The battle itself unfolds exactly as your strategic analysis predicted, but the precision of execution still exhilarates your tactical sensibilities. Hungarian heavy cavalry, despite excellent individual training and superior equipment, cannot maintain formation against coordinated arrow storms that inflict casualties while avoiding direct contact. Hungarian crossbow units, despite technical advantages in range and penetration, cannot target enemies who refuse to remain stationary long enough for effective engagement. Most devastating of all, Hungarian defensive doctrine provides no response to tactical innovations they've never encountered and cannot counter with traditional techniques. The engagement becomes a systematic demonstration of nomadic tactical superiority rather than a battle between approximately equal forces. European military capabilities, despite their reputation and their success against traditional enemies, prove inadequate when confronted by organizational advantages they were never designed to address. The Hungarian army disintegrates not through dramatic defeat, but through mathematical inevitability, created by superior strategic planning and tactical coordination. Standing on the battlefield as morning mist rises from ground littered with evidence of European military inadequacy, you understand that this engagement has accomplished objectives that extend far beyond tactical victory. You've established beyond contradiction that European civilization cannot provide effective military resistance to systematic Mongol conquest. The implications stretch across the entire continent, suggesting that political submission offers the only realistic alternative to destruction for kingdoms that recognize mathematical reality. The systematic destruction of European military capabilities continues across multiple theaters as your coordinated campaign achieves objectives with efficiency that surprises even your optimistic projections. Polish armies prove as inadequate as Hungarian forces when confronted by tactical innovations they cannot comprehend or counter. German military intervention fails because traditional European coordination cannot match nomadic organizational capabilities operating at continental scales. Most importantly, European political leadership demonstrates complete inability to develop effective responses to strategic challenges that operate according to principles outside their historical experience. Your reputation among European courts evolves beyond mere military concern to approach religious awe as intelligence reports describe tactical capabilities that seem to violate natural laws governing warfare. Mongol armies appear simultaneously in locations hundreds of miles apart, coordinate complex operations across distances that traditional military thinking considers impossible, achieve objectives through systematic pressure that European defensive doctrine cannot address effectively. You've become synonymous with military inevitability, with strategic thinking that operates beyond conventional understanding, with organizational capability that can project nomadic power across any obstacle. The psychological impact of your systematic victories creates political conditions that accomplish strategic objectives without continued fighting. European kingdoms recognize that military resistance serves no purpose beyond prolonging destruction, that traditional defensive capabilities cannot challenge nomadic organizational advantages, that submission offers the only realistic path toward survival. Your reputation achieves objectives that would otherwise require years of continued campaigning and enormous expenditure of military resources. Intelligence gathered during the campaign provides comprehensive information about European political systems, economic capabilities, geographical features, and military potential that reveals opportunities for administrative control that could integrate European territories into broader imperial systems. European civilization possesses technical capabilities, agricultural productivity, and population densities that could enhance Mongol imperial power significantly if properly administered. Most importantly, European political fragmentation creates opportunities for governance through client relationships that could minimize administrative costs while maximizing tributary benefits. Your analysis of European strengths and weaknesses reveals a civilization that has achieved impressive technical capabilities while maintaining political and military systems that cannot effectively challenge systematic conquest by organizationally superior forces. European engineering achievements demonstrate advanced technical knowledge. European agricultural systems support population densities that exceed anything in nomadic territories. European commercial networks provide access to global trade opportunities. Yet these individual capabilities are not integrated into strategic systems capable of mounting effective resistance to coordinated imperial expansion. As winter approaches and campaigning season draws to a close, you review achievements that have exceeded even your ambitious projections for European conquest. 3 major European armies have been systematically destroyed. Dozens of fortified positions have been demonstrated to be meaningless obstacles to nomadic siege capabilities, and political conditions have been created that make continued resistance appear pointless to any rational calculation. The campaign establishes Mongol power as a global force that recognizes no geographical boundaries, acknowledges no military limitations, accepts no political constraints on imperial expansion. Your position within the Mongol imperial hierarchy reaches its absolute peak as other commanders recognize that your European campaign has demonstrated capabilities that establish new standards for strategic planning and tactical execution. Ogedei Khan increasingly defers to your judgment on matters that affect imperial policy across multiple theaters, understanding that your strategic thinking operates at scales that encompass global considerations rather than regional tactical problems. The European campaign concludes with Mongol forces positioned for administrative control over vast territories, while your mind turns toward challenges that will test imperial capabilities at their ultimate limits. European conquest has been achieved, but successful governance of European territories will require innovations in administration, taxation, military integration, and political control that extend beyond traditional nomadic competencies. The greatest tests of imperial organization still lie ahead, requiring strategic thinking that addresses not just military conquest, but long-term imperial sustainability across diverse civilizations. Your transformation from tribal warrior to architect of global empire continues, driven by intellectual challenges that find unlimited scope for development in problems that involve the fundamental reorganization of human political relationships across multiple continents and diverse civilizations. The military phase of European conquest has been completed, but the administrative phase will require innovations that could establish foundations for imperial control that lasts for centuries rather than decades. The Song dynasty represents the culmination of Chinese civilization's military and technological achievement, a realm where gunpowder weapons have revolutionized siege warfare, where naval capabilities surpass anything previously encountered, where defensive engineering incorporates innovations that render traditional siege techniques obsolete. From their capital at Hangzhou, Song emperors govern territories that support populations exceeding 60 million people, command resources that dwarf the combined wealth of all previous Mongol conquests, and maintain military forces equipped with weapons technology that represents the cutting-edge of 13th century warfare. Yet as you study intelligence reports in your Jur outside the Song frontier fortress of Xiangyang, your aging eyes sharp with accumulated wisdom from 4 decades of continuous warfare, you see not insurmountable obstacles, but fascinating problems that will test the ultimate development of your strategic thinking. Song military capabilities may exceed anything previously encountered, but their advantages operate within systematic frameworks that can be analyzed, understood, and ultimately countered through innovations that build upon everything you've learned about warfare, organization, and the systematic application of tactical intelligence to complex strategic challenges. Your appointment as Supreme Commander for Song Conquest Operations reflects Munka Khan's recognition that this campaign requires capabilities that transcend ordinary military competence to embrace strategic thinking at world historical levels. The challenges involved dwarf anything previously attempted: siege warfare against fortifications that incorporate the most advanced engineering techniques in the world, naval operations against fleets that command complete superiority on rivers and coastal approaches, technological competition against enemies who possess weapons that can devastate traditional nomadic tactics. Your approach to these unprecedented challenges reflects the maturation of strategic thinking over 40 years of continuous innovation and adaptation. Rather than attempting direct confrontation with Song advantages, you focus on systematic identification and exploitation of weaknesses that superior technology cannot eliminate. Song military capabilities, despite their technical sophistication, operate within organizational frameworks that create vulnerabilities for enemies who understand how to exploit them. Most importantly, Song defensive doctrine assumes enemies will follow conventional approaches, creating opportunities for tactical innovations that neutralize technological advantages through superior strategic coordination. The campaign begins with comprehensive intelligence gathering that exceeds anything attempted during previous operations. Song territories must be mapped in detail that encompasses not just geographical features, but political relationships, economic systems, military capabilities, technological capacities, and population distributions. This information provides foundation for strategic planning that addresses every aspect of sustained warfare against enemies whose capabilities exceed traditional nomadic competencies in multiple areas. Your systematic approach to siege warfare reaches its ultimate development during the reduction of Xiangyang, the fortress that guards the primary route into Song heartland territories. This engagement will test every innovation you've developed in siege techniques against defenses that incorporate cutting-edge military engineering, advanced weapons technology, and defensive doctrines refined through centuries of warfare against nomadic raiders. Picture yourself during the final assault on Xiangyang's walls, standing in your command position as dawn breaks over siege lines that represent the culmination of decades of tactical innovation. The morning air carries sounds that epitomize evolved warfare. The deep thunder of counterweight trebuchets launching projectiles that can breach any fortification, the sharp crack of early firearms that demonstrate Song technological advantages, the coordinated shouts of assault troops moving with precision that reflects systematic military training developed over a lifetime of campaign experience. Your mind processes the unfolding operation with clarity that comes from complete mastery of siege warfare principles. Every artillery position has been calculated to maximize effectiveness while minimizing vulnerability to counter-battery fire that utilizes weapons more advanced than anything previously encountered. Every assault route has been planned to exploit weaknesses in defensive systems that incorporate the most sophisticated military engineering in the world. Every coordination sequence has been rehearsed until timing between units operates with mathematical precision that negates technological advantages through superior tactical organization. Your heart beats with steady confidence despite the magnitude of tactical challenges being addressed. This siege represents the ultimate test of everything you've learned about warfare, the final proof that systematic strategic thinking can overcome any defensive advantage through innovations that operate beyond conventional military understanding. The fortress that symbolizes Song military engineering will fall not through technological superiority, but through organizational capabilities that transform individual tactical innovations into coordinated strategic systems. The breach comes not through dramatic assault, but through systematic application of siege techniques that have been refined beyond Song defensive anticipations. Your combination of advanced artillery, coordinated infantry assault, systematic psychological pressure, and tactical innovations that Song military doctrine cannot address creates conditions where continued resistance becomes mathematically pointless rather than merely difficult. The fortress falls because your strategic planning has anticipated and countered every defensive advantage Song engineering can provide. Standing among the captured walls as your troops secure positions that commanded the primary approach to Song heartland territories, you understand that this victory represents something beyond tactical achievement. You've demonstrated that nomadic organizational capabilities, despite technological disadvantages, can systematically overcome any defensive system through strategic thinking that operates at levels Song military education cannot match. The implications extend across the entire remaining campaign to suggest that Song military capabilities, despite their technological sophistication, cannot effectively resist systematic conquest by forces that understand how to exploit organizational weaknesses. Yet even as you celebrate tactical success, your mind turns toward broader challenges that extend beyond military conquest to encompass questions of imperial administration that will determine whether Mongol expansion can create sustainable political systems. Song territories possess technical capabilities, population densities, economic productivity, and cultural sophistication that could enhance imperial power significantly if properly integrated. But successful governance of such sophisticated populations requires innovations in administration that extend far beyond traditional nomadic competencies. The naval warfare required to complete Song conquest presents tactical challenges that test your adaptability in entirely new dimensions. Song fleets control river systems and coastal approaches, with vessels that incorporate technological advances unknown to nomadic warfare, weapons that can devastate traditional cavalry tactics, defensive capabilities that render conventional assault techniques ineffective. Yet your systematic approach to tactical innovation proves equal to these challenges as you develop combined operations that coordinate land and water forces in ways that neither Song nor Mongol military doctrine had previously envisioned. Your solution combines captured Song naval technology with nomadic organizational advantages to create hybrid capabilities that exploit strengths from both military traditions, while negating weaknesses that would compromise either approach alone. Song vessels provide platforms for nomadic archery techniques that prove devastatingly effective against crews trained for different tactical environments, while nomadic mobility enables rapid concentration of naval forces at decisive points that Song defensive planning cannot anticipate or counter effectively. The psychological impact of your naval innovations proves as significant as their direct tactical consequences. Song commanders, confident in naval superiority that has protected their territories for generations, find themselves facing enemies who operate according to principles that their extensive naval experience cannot address. Your systematic adaptation to water warfare demonstrates that nomadic tactical genius recognizes no environmental limitations, acknowledges no technological constraints, accepts no assumptions about what kinds of military operations remain beyond nomadic capabilities. The final campaigns against Song resistance unfold across multiple theaters simultaneously, testing your ability to coordinate complex operations while managing the transition from conquest to administration. Your forces must reduce remaining fortified positions, eliminate scattered military resistance, establish control over population centers, and begin implementing administrative systems that can govern territories whose complexity exceeds anything previously incorporated into the Mongol Empire. Your reputation reaches its absolute pinnacle during these final operations as subordinate commanders recognize that they're witnessing military genius operating at levels that redefine what warfare can accomplish. The systematic reduction of Song military capabilities, the successful adaptation to naval warfare, the coordinated transition from conquest to governance demonstrate strategic thinking that encompasses every aspect of imperial expansion and consolidation. Picture yourself during what you somehow sense will be your final major engagement. The assault on a Song fortress whose name will be forgotten by history, but whose reduction represents the completion of your life's work. You stand on ground made sacred by decades of tactical innovation, your weathered hands steady on the reins of a horse that has carried you across more battlefields than any commander in human history. The morning mist rises from river valleys that have witnessed the transformation of nomadic tribal warfare into systematic imperial conquest. Your heart beats with the rhythm of accumulated experience as you observe preparations for what may be your last contribution to Mongol military supremacy. Every tactical decision reflects wisdom earned through 40 years of continuous warfare. Every strategic calculation incorporates lessons learned from campaigns that spanned continents and challenged every assumption about what nomadic peoples could accomplish. The fortress before you will fall because your mind has systematically solved every problem that fortification engineering can present. The engagement unfolds with precision that epitomizes your approach to warfare throughout your entire career. Superior planning negates defensive advantages. Systematic coordination overwhelms individual resistance. Tactical innovations that enemies cannot anticipate eliminate their capacity for effective response. The fortress falls not through luck or heroic sacrifice, but through mathematical inevitability created by strategic thinking that operates beyond conventional military understanding. Standing among the captured fortifications as your troops secure the final objectives of a campaign that began decades earlier, you understand that your military career has achieved everything possible within the constraints of human capability and historical circumstances. You've demonstrated that tactical genius, properly applied, can overcome any obstacle, that strategic thinking can reshape global political relationships, that organizational innovation can project nomadic power across any distance or against any enemy. Yet the approaching end of your active military service brings reflection on costs that accompanied these unprecedented achievements. The loneliness of supreme command has deepened during decades when your strategic thinking operated at levels few subordinates could comprehend or meaningfully support. The mental strain of continuous tactical innovation, strategic planning, and organizational responsibility has pushed your intellectual capabilities beyond their sustainable limits. The physical demands of campaign leadership across impossible distances and challenging terrain have aged you in ways that no amount of tactical success can reverse. Your legacy within the Mongol Empire transcends simple military achievement to encompass fundamental transformation of what nomadic peoples can accomplish when systematic strategic thinking guides their expansion. The tactical innovations you've developed, the organizational systems you've created, the strategic principles you've established provide foundations for imperial control that could last for centuries. Most importantly, your career demonstrates that individual genius, properly applied to systematic problems, can indeed reshape the fundamental relationships between civilizations. As winter settles over the conquered Song territories, and you review maps that show Mongol control extending across the largest contiguous empire in human history, you understand that your transformation from forest-dwelling tribesman to architect of global imperial expansion has reached its natural conclusion. The skills that sufficed for tracking wounded animals through familiar terrain have evolved into capabilities that can track enemy armies across continents and civilizations with equal precision and infinitely greater historical consequences. Your final reports to the Great Khan detail not just tactical victories, but comprehensive analysis of administrative challenges that will determine whether military conquest can create sustainable political systems. Song territories possess capabilities that could enhance imperial power significantly, but their integration requires innovations in governance that extend beyond traditional nomadic competencies. The strategic thinking that achieved military objectives must now address questions of taxation, administration, cultural integration, and political control that will test imperial capabilities in entirely different dimensions. The intellectual challenges that sustained your interest throughout decades of military campaigning find continued scope for development in problems of imperial administration, though you understand that younger minds will bear primary responsibility for implementing solutions to these challenges. Your role evolves naturally from active command to advisory consultation, providing strategic guidance based on accumulated experience while allowing protégés to develop their own approaches to tactical and organizational problems. Your death, when it comes in the winter of your 75th year, occurs not dramatically on some distant battlefield, but quietly in your own gear, surrounded by maps that document a lifetime of geographical and intellectual exploration. The mind that revolutionized warfare, that demonstrated nomadic capabilities no settled civilization had thought possible, that systematically solved tactical problems which had challenged military thinkers for centuries, simply stops processing the endless stream of strategic calculations that had occupied every waking moment for more than half a century. The immediate aftermath of your passing reveals the extent to which Mongol military capabilities depended on your individual genius. Campaigns that had proceeded with clockwork precision under your strategic guidance encounter complications that expose the difference between systematic innovation and routine application of established techniques. Your protégés prove capable of implementing your methods, but none demonstrates the tactical creativity that allowed continuous adaptation to unprecedented challenges. Your historical legacy extends far beyond the Mongol Empire to influence military thinking across civilizations that never directly encountered your innovations. Chinese strategic manuals incorporate principles derived from analysis of your campaigns. European military education adapts organizational concepts that nomadic warfare developed under your leadership. Muslim historians record tactical innovations that redefined what systematic warfare could accomplish. Your name becomes synonymous with military genius that transcends cultural boundaries to establish universal principles of strategic thinking. The geographic scope of territories that fell to armies under your command encompasses more of the Earth's surface than any other military commander in human history. From Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to India, the political boundaries that existed before Mongol expansion were systematically eliminated and replaced by imperial administration that reflected your innovations in organization, logistics, communication, and tactical coordination. You reshaped not just political maps, but fundamental assumptions about what nomadic peoples could accomplish when systematic strategic thinking guided their expansion. Your intellectual legacy proves even more enduring than your territorial conquests. The tactical innovations you developed, the organizational systems you created, the strategic principles you established continue to influence military thinking centuries after your death. Future generals study your campaigns not just for historical interest, but for practical lessons about systematic approaches to strategic problems, tactical adaptation to changing circumstances, and organizational innovations that can project power across vast distances. The ultimate measure of your achievement lies not in any single victory, but in the complete transformation of human understanding about what individual genius can accomplish when systematically applied to strategic challenges. You proved that tactical brilliance, properly supported by organizational innovation and strategic thinking, can indeed reshape global political relationships, that nomadic advantages can overcome any defensive system, that systematic warfare can achieve objectives that seem impossible based on simple numerical or technological comparisons. Your story concludes where it began, in the endless grass seas of the Mongolian steppes, but the world you leave behind bears little resemblance to the fractured tribal landscape of your childhood. The political geography of an entire continent has been systematically restructured. The military capabilities of numerous civilizations have been fundamentally challenged, and the strategic principles you developed continue to guide imperial expansion long after your individual contribution has ended. The child who learned to track wounded bears through forest undergrowth became the greatest military strategist in human history, through systematic application of intellectual curiosity to challenges that scaled from individual survival to global imperial expansion. Your mind, once focused on reading animal signs in snow and predicting weather patterns across seasonal migrations, ultimately mastered the infinitely more complex art of reading political relationships across civilizations and predicting strategic developments across continents. In death, as in life, you remain undefeated, not because you never encountered superior enemies, but because your systematic approach to strategic thinking consistently identified solutions to tactical problems that defeated every opponent who challenged Mongol expansion during your active career. History records no instance of strategic failure during 4 decades of continuous campaigning across terrain that encompassed every geographical challenge and against enemies that represented every military tradition known to 13th century civilization. Your name echoes across the steppes on winds that still carry the memory of hoofbeats, millions of them moving in perfect coordination across vast distances, carrying riders who answered to your commands and achieved victories that seemed impossible until your tactical genius made them inevitable. The greatest general in human history rests beneath Mongolian skies that witnessed his transformation from tribal outsider to architect of the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known.